So now that we've seen how Pro-MB works internally and how to create different bands and work with the sidechain and the mid-side options, I wanted to spend some time doing a couple of examples. And in this first video, I want to focus on mixing and sort of mastering examples, like more subtle usage of Pro-MB. And then in the next video, I want to talk about sound design examples because it's a great plugin for both worlds. And I want to sort of show you how you can use it for the different approaches. So for this first example video, I have a track here that is unmastered yet. It has been mixed and it's already compressed a little bit. It's one of my own songs, but it hasn't really been mastered, and I have a section here that I wanna work on using Pro-MB. So let's first listen to that, and then let's identify the things that we could improve on. So what I hear is that it's a little bit crowded in the mid-range. It's also a little bit dull. I would like it to be a little bit brighter. So I wanna first compress the lows a little bit, make them more steady. Then I wanna probably clean up that mid-range a little bit, and then I wanna work on the high brightness of the track, sort of the airy sound. So this, like what I'm now saying, what I want to do is normally what I write down before I start working on something. So with a thing like Pro-MB, it's very easy to go like overboard, and especially with mastering, you can go really crazy with this and then go way too far. So normally what I do is I really try to carefully listen to the track, which is what I've done before the video already. That's how I can identify the problems quicker. But I actually spend some time to listen to it and carefully try to assess what it needs. And then from that, I make a plan on how I'm going to work with these dynamic tools. So let's first focus on the low end, and then let's work away from there. So I'm gonna create a new band there. I'm gonna solo that, and then let's just listen to that. So it has some nice low end, but I would like it to be a little bit more consistent, and I also think it can just be a little bit more present. So what I'm going to do is compress this with just a regular compressor, and because we're working with low frequencies are very slow, and they have a longer wavelength, right? So there are slower frequencies as well, and because of that we can sometimes get a little bit of distortion if we're using fast attack times. So to compensate for that, I'm going to enable my look ahead, and I'm going to give it just a few milliseconds of look ahead. So I'm going to compress this with like a 4:1 ratio. Actually seems fine, and I'll set my attack pretty quick, and I'll set a pretty long release. So remember, the attack and the release time, they're already adapted on the frequency band that you're in, because this, like Fabfilter or Pro-MB rather, is constantly checking your input signal and analyzing that. And because of that, it sort of automatically calculates what the release and what the attack percentages should be. That's why it's not showing you milliseconds, but it's showing you percentages, because it changes depending on your input material and depending on the band that you're on. So right now we're compressing this a little bit. Let's take a look at our gain reduction, which seems to be about 3 dB on the loudest peaks. So I'm gonna make up for this 2.5 dB to get some more overall consistency. And then I'm also going to take this pan ring and drag it a little bit more to the left, which will lower the side channel level. So let's set that to -5, for example. This will make this band more mono. Okay, so I think that's nice. Then this area here, we have a little bit of messy sort of frequencies, which I want to clean up. And to do that, I'm also going to compress this but I'm not going to use any makeup gain, and that is like a way to sort of keep those frequencies a little bit lower down. So let's see where we need to set our threshold. So I'm setting a pretty low threshold, so normally it would get a lot of compression, but my ratio is very smooth right now, very subtle, and I have a bit of a slower attack, so it's just gently carving it away there if those frequencies build up too much. So now let's focus on the higher ends. First there's this area, which is always a sort of an area where we have to be careful, because these frequencies are perceived very loud by us. But what I want to do here is I want to make it a little bit brighter. So I think I'm going to do some regular compression there with some regular makeup gain. But I'm also want to try to see if I can get this to sound a little bit more stereo. So I'm going to use the stereo link feature here. Let's just find again our suitable threshold. So now what we could do here is we could duck a little bit more in the mid channel, so compress the mid channel a little bit more. And what this is going to do is it's going to emphasize the sides, because they get, like, the volume of the side channel gets less pushed down. So let's set this to maybe 40% mid only. Right, and then finally, we don't have to do anything with the, like, it's not like we have to use every band, right? But for this section of the track, I actually want to use every band, but it's totally fine if you have something like that and you leave a gap there, somewhere in the middle. That's like the cool thing about Pro-MB. We can freely make these bands and we don't have to make all the bands. So that's a good thing. So now we're gonna create our high band. This is going to be quite a big frequency range. Let's listen to that. So here are some nice glitchy things and some hi-hats and some noise sort of sounds. And what I want to do here, I want to expand this upward expansion. Like, I want to expand this in a positive direction. So I'm going to set my range to a plus value. Let's say +2. And then everything that's going over the threshold, it gets expanded. So this was that mode that made, this is like the great transient designer mode. When something is already loud, it's going to make it even louder. And I'm going to do that with using a very fast attack, a pretty fast release as well. And I'm going to mainly focus that on the side channel. So here's an interesting thing. So with this third band right here, I'm compressing that, and I'm compressing more than what I'm making up for. So if we solo that band, the compression at the loudest peaks is pretty severe. It pushes it down like pretty far. So that means that this is set to the mid channel right now, which means that the mid channel will get softer respectively to, not respectively, like in comparison with the side channel. And therefore we're gonna have a stereo enhancement. But for this last band, I'm actually stereo linking or processing the side channel more. But that's because in this case we're doing expansion and we're doing upwards expansion. So both, even though this one is focused on processing the mids more and this one is processing the sides more, they both have the same effect of making it more stereo, create a wider image. So let's listen to this. Alright, and now of course the fire test. Let's first let's bypass it here. I found that this bypass here in the plugin itself is cleaner than the DAW bypass, in Logic's case at least. If I bypass it here, it will sometimes click and you get like a pop in the sound, and this one is always very clean. So I'm using this one to bypass this. So first without. Can you hear that if I bypass this, it suddenly sounds very dull and sort of uninteresting, and with Pro-MB it just sounds a little bit more exciting. Alright, so I really like that. I really like that change. Let's take a look at another example. Here I have two tracks. I have an acoustic upright bass and I have a jazzy drum loop, the one that we've heard before. And I just want to experiment with this for a little bit and see what we can come up with using Pro-MB and maybe using some of the sidechain options. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take this drum loop and I'll send that to bus 11. And then on my bass track, I open a Pro-MB and I'm gonna monitor bus 11 there. And then let's listen to this bass as well. Alright, and then let's create a new band there. Let's start with the full width band for now. And let's open the expert panel and then listen to our external signal. Alright, so there we have our drum beat. Now if I want to be fancy, I could open the analyze settings here and I could analyze my sidechain signal, which will give me a new sort of red graph there, which I can freeze. So now we see three analyzes here. We have the one before our compression, we have the one after our compression, and we have the red one, which is our drum loop, our sidechain input. Alright, so using this drum loop, let's first do some regular sidechain compression. And let's set the filter to focus on the kick drum. And then I'll set a very low or hard knee. Let's do about 6 dB. The attack is already pretty fast. I'll set my range to -20. So, and then I'll set a high ratio, like an 8:1. And now we can clearly hear the bass guitar duck on the drums. So with the drums. Okay, that's step one. It might not be very pretty yet, but they are out of each other's way. If I mute this whole band. Right, so it doesn't sound great in this example, but we are creating some more clarity. So let's work on it some more. Let's go to our drum beat and open the Pro-MB there. And let's create one of those simple gates there. So I'll create a new band. And I'll set my threshold a little bit high, then I'll set it to expand, and I'll set my range down to -30. Okay, that's getting pretty funky. Now let's open the bass Pro-MB again, and let's move this band to only actually process the low frequencies. And then we can create a band in the middle here, and here's quite a lot of the energy and the high attack of the bass. So let's expand this with every kick hit. So we're going to visit our first filter here, which is set from 40 to 320 hertz. So I want to use the same filter on my second band. So 40 to 320, so that it's listening to exactly the same sort of kick drum. And then here I want to expand this in a positive direction. So whenever the signal goes over the threshold, it's gonna expand that. So that means in this case that on every kick drum is going to make these frequencies a little bit louder, and let's also make them a little bit wider by expanding the side channel like that. Alright, let's listen to them. Okay, that's pretty cool, right? Let's add one more instrument to this to see what we can do with Pro-MB in sort of a production mixing environment like this one. Alright, so I've added another pad to this arrangement. It sounds like this. Alright, and I have Pro-MB on that channel, and Pro-MB here is listening to our sidechain bus 11, which was our jazzy drum set, our drum kit basically. So let's first solo this pad, and then let's create one single new band, and then let's again audition our drum loop. And while we're at it, let's also enable the sidechain input there, the sidechain analyzer I mean. Okay, this is nice because now we can see our snare drums. So let's set up something that sort of responds to the snare drum. So I'm gonna go with the free filter again. I'll go into addition mode and I try to find those snare drums, which I now can also see in the analyzer. And they're right there. Alright, and let's set this to expand mode, and then let's set our output all the way down, and then we'll set our range all the way up, so that on those snare hits it's going to boost our pad signal. So now this is really nicely grooving along with our drums. And I can see that I'm peaking a little bit in my output, so I can just take down the level there a little bit, let's say -2. Now this is one approach. We could of course do this only for one band, like for example those high frequencies. And then we could set up the other ones to duck on every kick drum, so we can listen to multiple different regions of that same drum loop. So here, if I create a new free filter, I can set that to the same frequency as the filters of the other instruments, which was 40 Hz and 320, and I can do some regular compression for that band. So compress threshold minus, what should we do, 24, and then I'll set that to external, of course. So we can create some pretty groovy variations here. So let's try that with the bass. And we can try and make the bass a little bit choppier if we use another Pro-MB, Dynamics Pro-MB. We could use the gate on that to only allow the attack through. So let's listen to just that acoustic bass again. And let's set up a gate that cuts the whole signal, but the filter of that is only listening to the high frequencies. So with the knee, we haven't really talked a lot about the knee yet, except for showing that image what it does. And this is actually a good example of what the knee does. If I have a soft knee in this example, what will happen is that some of the signal that is under the threshold, under the point of the threshold, it still gets like expanded in this case already. If we're in compressed mode, it would still get compressed, and that's because it starts a little bit earlier. I think the best way to show you this is if I open an equalizer, and you might be familiar with this equalizer. Let's make that a little bit bigger. Let's say I create a low cut filter here. Low cut like that. My low cut position is here. It's at 735.2 Hertz O2. But before that point, it already starts to duck those. It already starts to lower those frequencies, and that's to make a more gentle slope. So this is officially sort of the cutoff point, but it starts to drop or fall down a little bit before that already. And that's the same deal with the knee. So if the knee is very soft, even signals that are just a little bit below the threshold, they can still cause that expansion or compression, which you can sort of see right now. So you can hear that with the hard knee, that really doesn't happen. It's only with that soft knee. Right, so I hope that shows a little bit better what that does. So because I want it to be more precise, that's why I often go for a little bit of a harder knee. The default setting is quite soft actually. So let's set this to -22. Okay, and now with the release, we can say how staccato or how choppy this is going to be. Like something like this would also be a perfectly fine setting, because now you're just decreasing the sustain a little bit, so you're creating a little bit more air or room. This would be a more subtle approach. You see that just towards like the end of the note, it's going to lower it. So it creates just a little bit of space before the next hit. So, and that was for the release, and with the attack we can do the opposite. So we can make it, with the attack we can also do some fancy stuff, like in this case we're creating some, almost like the drummer is playing sort of more softly. You get sort of the brushes kind of feel, you know, instead of using drumsticks, using drum brushes. If I set this all the way to 0, it gets pretty clicky, but with a soft attack, So using the mix knob here on the output section, you could dial in a setting like this to, for example, in your breakdown, make the drum sound a little bit softer by having the attack a little bit longer. Like the more you'll use this plugin, the more of these examples you'll find, like things you can do with dynamics that are really interesting and that can really give the song more life. This would be one example. And then you would automate this mix knob here to only come into play at certain like softer sections, or the other way around. If you have a hard attack, you could automate that to be active only for the choruses, for example. Right, I hope that gives you some ideas to how to use Pro-MB in a mixing and a little bit of a mastering context. Next, let's take a look at some sound design examples.